Yeah. I'll just.
Do you want us to scooch over there?
It really doesn't matter.
With my I was hoping for this. I was hoping other people would know.
Yeah, they should be. This is why I'm not. Oh, payment. Right on.
There's a lot of people on the train. Sometimes you have to wait like 2 or 3 times the train because there's so much people.
Oh, yeah.
So like sometimes it's just you're trying so hard, but you have to wait it.
And it's going to be even worse now that the STM might be going on strike. Or...
They are. There's no mics. They definitely are going on strike.
But I know they're going on strike until unless they find an agreement between now and next week, next Monday.
It's only Monday.
It's Monday, Wednesday, Friday. So it shouldn't affect this class specifically, but it might affect other classes.
It's normal hours, but for the others, it's just like in the morning, in the afternoon. It's normal.
Yeah, well, it's normal.
I mean, it happened this summer at least twice.
That's true. And look, I hope that they manage to find something. Like, having been on strike myself before, it does happen that things.
Yeah, didn't the teachers go on strike like 2 years ago?
Yeah.
Or was it the last?
Yeah, it would have been 2 years ago because it was my first semester teaching at college, and it was also my first semester experiencing like weeks of strike. So it was fun.
Here at EDM too, there was a strike at some point because it affected only the teachers, though not the aides and others.
So everyone else had to work like idiots. Well, no, I know. I'm making jokes about that, but no, good on them, I guess. Okay. Hi, Ling, by the way. I didn't formally say hello, but hello. Okay, so maybe Francesca's going to join us today. Maybe not. I'll keep this open for now. I'll also keep my email open, which I don't usually do, just in case she sends a message, because sometimes students have a difficult time finding their classes. Okay, so of course today we're discussing what I guess is now one of the more infamous works of literature, right? And if you've read it, you'll kind of understand why. Have we had a chance to finish reading Heart of Darkness? Yeah? Okay, good. How did we, was it too long? Because my version is like 75 pages-ish, right? The way that the pages are formatted.
Oh, well, online it was 50 pages.
Yeah. Okay,
but there was no space between the paragraphs. It was just like...
Yeah.
So that was...
But it wasn't too difficult to get it done for today, is what I mean. No? Okay, good. Just because, again, I organized certain things in the schedule based off of how long I assumed you would take to read certain things, right? So that's why I felt comfortable spending 1 week on this, because I assumed you would be finished it. But something like The Tiger Flu, we're spending 2 weeks just because it's basically the length of this entire volume, or a little bit more. So I assumed it would be a little bit harder to finish in an entire week, right? Okay. Before we get into that, just a few administrative things. Ling, did you get a chance to think about what you might do as a presentation? On which week you might present? Did you get a chance to think about that?
I still don't choose a date.
Okay, good. As usual, just as soon as you know, just let me know so I can I can include it in the syllabus. And does anyone have any critical readings that they wrote for today? No? Okay, that's fine.
Are you expecting us to write it in the, first person?
First person.
Or the third person?
Because it's basically meant to be like a direct analysis, right? You can kind of take it in whatever style of writing you want. I think for what I'm expecting for this, close analysis of certain aspects, right? Close and short analysis, I should mention. Usually people go with passive voice on that one, right? Like the characters are this. But I'm not going to remove points if you decide to go with like active voice or anything like that. But yeah, it's a good question. Any other questions about any of the assignments? Yeah, please.
I was just surprised. The critical readings,
Duh.
were we supposed to do one for this week?
Not necessarily for this week.
Whenever.
No.
I got confused for half a second there. I was like, oh my god, did I forget?
No, I asked because we're what, week 3, week 4,
3.
week 3,
Yeah.
and sometimes students start giving them in right around this time, so that's why I was just asking. But no, you can give them in at any point in the semester.
All right, perfect.
Yeah, so don't worry about it.
And also, just
Yeah.
I forgot to write it down. Which thing did I told you for
Yeah.
the
Hold
whole
on.
presentation? Because I totally forgot. I know it's in
Yeah.
November, but
Oh yeah, I didn't update the studium syllabus, so
but
hold
I
on.
kind of forgot.
No, it's all good. Yeah, that's totally reasonable.
Because I chose on the spot too. So
Yeah.
okay, I'll do that. I was just like, oh, I'm gonna do that one.
Yeah.
So I'm like, oh no, which was it?
Hold on. Linear on week 5. You chose week 10, Alicia. So November 18th.
November.
Yeah. No, you got it. Yeah. Uh-huh. Very good.
At least I was not, close to it. I have a lot of time to get it done.
Any other questions?
Oh, I do have another
Yes.
question. You talked about Anna's archive
Oh, yeah.
last time.
Uh-huh.
Can I download stuff from there safely? It's not a.
If you have an ad blocker.
No.
Might be a good idea, but
Okay.
I use it all the time, and
So you never
my
have
computer
issues.
is
Perfect.
still alive and well.
Perfect. I just wanted to ask. in case.
Yeah, no, I use it all the time. It's fine.
Perfect.
So yeah,
I'm gonna
don't
start
worry about it.
On the great arrangements.
Yeah,
Found
yeah,
it on
cool.
there.
I will upload it. I try to keep like 2 weeks in advance for
Perfect.
things like
No
that,
worries.
so I'll
Yeah,
try
yeah.
to upload it a little bit later. So how I wanted to, I guess, organize today's discussion was based off of okay, no, it's not. Sorry. It was based a little bit on last week, right? And if you've read Heart of Darkness, as you said, right, which is good, you should already start to see why I kind of put the Romantics next to this class, right? Even though there's like 100 years separating the two texts or the two types of texts that we talked about. And something that I did not explicitly talk about last week, but that I think was kind of implicit, which, by the way, if ever you're looking for a tip on how to claim something that you didn't do, using the term implicit throughout, great way of doing it, right? If you're writing your conclusion, you're like, oh, damn, I wanted to talk about this. Just say, this was implicit throughout, and it forces the other person to reread your entire text and ascribe meaning to it where there wasn't. So that's what I'm doing right now, but for the entirety of last class. One way that I think is really good to think about Romantics that I think will be helpful for Conrad's work is that a lot of people think of Romantic poetry as works, or not just poetry necessarily, but we'll say literature. Literature and poetry, broadly speaking, of excess, right? And there can be really a lot of ways that we consider this idea, right? Both engaging with the fact that there is excessive consumption rising around this time, right? Excessive exploitation, right? These are the two main ones that we talked about last week, right? But also, and this was the more implicit part, so to speak, a lot of Romantics, especially Blake, engage with poetry as channeling that excess, right? Trying to understand the excesses of the world through an excess of poetry, right? Which gives it that flavor or that sense that we talked about, right? That is a bit over-exaggerated in some ways. And for Blake and I think Shelley others, right? I wouldn't go so far as to categorize Wordsworth in this category per se. Keats, certainly. But a lot of romantics, they really engage with this idea of excess, right? As an ethical gesture, right? Of sharing in the excess, poetically speaking, right? And poetry allowing us to consider what that sharing of excess might be, right? On an emotional, on a philosophical, and on a social level, right? I don't know if that makes sense, so to speak. I see your face scrunching up. It's fine if it doesn't quite make sense. I wanted to start off there because I think it's a kind of good transition towards Heart of Darkness. So if you have questions, we can absolutely unpack that a little bit based off what we remember of Blake and Shelley last week.
I'm trying to think.
Yeah. So we used the term last week of sublime, right? The Kantian philosophical idea that some things are just so indescribably vast, right, and beautiful that you can't quite wrap your head around it. Yeah. I guess for a lot of romantics, right, they would qualify that as excess, right? It's an aesthetic and philosophical gesture, right, that in a world that is increasingly scientific and categorized, right, any kind of thing that goes beyond what is normally understood, right, that overflows, if you will, from the rigid understandings of the world, would be an excess that can hopefully be captured and channeled by the romantics. I guess that would be another way of putting it, right? And it is deliberately abstract in many ways, like the sublime. And it is very difficult to actually understand that and sit down and contemplate that, which is why poetry becomes such a useful tool I hate using that term because it makes it sound so rigid and scientific when it's not supposed to be. Yeah. A useful ideal, I guess, to channel excess through, right? And it becomes this really interesting contradiction between the rigidity of form, right, as poetry often demands, right? You follow a certain meter, you follow a certain lineation, while still trying to channel that excess. Yeah. And I think, without getting too deeply into it just yet, I think that's something that Conrad is interested in as well, but his time and place make it a little bit more difficult for him to engage with it in the same way that people like Shelley or Blake did. Right? And we'll get into what that time and place was like and why it would have been more difficult for him, right? But I mean, I'm assuming you can figure it out, right? Just based off of what happens in the text. But nevertheless, right, on a formalistic level, right, not just on a content level, it's a little bit more difficult for him to engage with that. I apologize for my voice, by the way. I think I'm coming down with something, although not sure, which is why I kind of want you to stay over there. So if my voice is cracking a little bit, it might be because of that. But yeah, I don't know. Was there anything that we wanted to kind of finish up on the romantics before we moved on to our topic this week? Right? Any questions? Because I have other modes of transition that I want to approach, but I just wanted to make sure that everything was kind of clear before we jumped off. Okay, good. Speaking of jumping off, hello.
Hello there.
Hi, Marcio?
Yes.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
So I'm Patrick.
Yes.
Yeah, we'll leave this open like this. I'm glad to finally meet you.
Yeah.
Okay, so we actually just finished, you can get closer. Yeah, so we just we're just getting into the topic for today, actually. So do you want to take a minute and just introduce yourself to the class. You can take the time to sit down and take a breath if you want. It's just because we're such a small class, I figured it would be useful.
It's gonna be like
just
to
us.
the end?
Yeah.
Okay.
There might be one other person, but pretty much it's going to be us. Yeah.
All right. So it was. Let me just say, it was difficult to find this place here. Yeah, it's kind of a maze or something like that.
Yes, it is.
And but what can I tell about myself? So I come from Brazil.
Yeah.
I was born and raised there, and I always had a dream to study languages or something related to that,
Nice.
especially in a university like this one here.
Good.
It's a big one. And what I do for a living, I teach English, my mother tongue, which is Portuguese, Spanish, Italian, and things like that.
Wow.
And I love language, yeah. And being here is like a dream for me.
Nice.
Yeah, of course. And I made it when I got the visa. And finally, actually, I just landed.
Oh, just today?
Today.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I'm shocked that you are here.
Yeah, but I'm feeling like a zombie. Yeah, feeling like a zombie. Yeah.
It doesn't show.
Really?
Yeah.
Maybe it's the Photoshop.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And that's the thing. And I'm just trying to improve my language skills in order to become a better professional and things like that. And
That's awesome.
This university has all the tools I need in order to improve myself.
That's fantastic.
And you guys are all from Montreal?
No, go ahead.
Yes, around here.
Around here.
Ish.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah. And
I'm
Ling.
from 2 hours away.
Okay.
It's I'm from a small town outside of this.
And
I come from China.
you work, sorry?
I come from China.
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 Yes.
China.
Yes.
Okay, China. Nice. I got a couple of fellows from China.
Nice.
Okay, yeah, my neighbors.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
Cool.
my neighbors there are from China. Cool. Nice. Nice to be here, guys.
That's awesome. So I don't know if you've kept up with what we're with the syllabus or
Just
anything
the topic for today.
Yeah. So you've read Heart of Darkness?
Yeah, I tried to read something in the airplane. And
Yeah. Okay, good. Fantastic. So usually, because we're such a small class, just so you know, it tends to be less lecture-based, right? Just because I don't want to do that for 3 hours, right? I think it would be a lot for 4 people to listen to me for 3 hours.
That's right.
I'm glad you agree. And it's a bit more seminar style, right? Conversational. And so having, even if you don't necessarily annotate or do in-depth reading, at least having the readings done is a pretty good way to start and engage with this class. So I'm glad you at least read some of Heart of Darkness for today. Yeah. That's awesome. And we won't do that now, but if you do have any questions about the syllabus or anything like that, please feel free to talk to me during the break or after class today.
About the exams.
Yeah, we'll talk about it a little bit after. But yeah, good. Okay, so one of the things that I wanted to start off today, because I like it. Last week we talked a little bit about Blake's paintings, and how they offered some insight into the work in and of itself. And I want to turn to a different painting today that I'll show you in a second. That happens that is produced and shown to the public about halfway between the century that separates the Romantics that we talked about last week and Conrad's work for today, right? And I think it's a really good depiction of the transitions that are happening between these two moments in our purview, I guess. So this is a painting by a painter, a British painter called J.M.W. Turner. And you can get closer if you want to see it, right? But I want you to take a minute and just look at what this is. So this was maybe done a little bit before, but it was certainly unveiled to the public in 1844, right? Take a second to look at it, and I want you to tell me what you see. Because it is something, right? He does have an intention behind it. And maybe the title of it, I'm deliberately not telling you the title,
Yeah,
so
okay.
because it reveals a little bit of it. But
Maybe there's some representation of the sea,
okay, the sea. Oh, interesting. I like that.
and you can see the horizon there,
Mhm.
the line.
Yep, there is some
It's
vague.
like blurred.
It is
Yeah.
very blurred.
Maybe there is a storm coming or something
Ooh,
like that.
good. Uh-huh. What's the main subject of the painting? I feel like a psychoanalyst. What do you see in this ink blot? Yeah.
It's like it's not about the painting; it's about what you see.
Yeah, exactly. Kind of, actually.
Oh, okay.
I would argue. But there is technically a specific subject here that none of you mentioned so
See,
far.
I think I saw a train or a bridge, but
Where do you
yeah.
see a train and a bridge?
I don't know, like, right there. But it sounds more like old architectures, with the arches
Mm-hmm.
that are like that. So it might be like I don't know.
Not sure what I mean.
Gosh, are we looking at the same picture?
She sees the train like right
Yeah,
there,
right there.
kind of thing.
It's like,
But I wasn't
the
sure
rails
it was
are-
a train.
yeah, I was not sure either. So I was like, is that more like?
You're right, Alicia, by the way. It is a train.
Hey.
Yeah. So, but you're all, that's why I was laughing about like, oh, what do you see in the painting? Because you're all right, on some level. It is intended to be blurry, right? The horizon is meant to be uncertain, right?
Mhm.
You technically see a perspective
Mhm.
there, right? There's a few
It doesn't
perspective
seem like
points.
attainable.
Yeah, good.
Yeah.
But yes, the central image is supposed to be a train. Okay.
Hold on.
Is that the title? Not.
So
not
the
maybe not.
the title is written up at the top. I think it's like steam, rain, and power or something like that.
Steam and speed.
Steam and speed, right?
And
Steam and-
there's also rain somewhere.
Yeah, steam, rain, speed, something along those lines.
So there is a storm.
Yeah.
It's that.
Yeah. But I think the fact that you were somewhat confused by what you're seeing here is kind of the point. Yeah. So let's unpack that a little bit, right? So last week we talked about the rise of what we kind of understand as industrial modernity, and how a lot of the literature of the time and a lot of the thinking of the time would have been very much influenced by the fact that more and more people were going into cities, working in factories, getting separated from their traditional livelihood, I guess you would call it, right, of farming or whatever, artisanship, etc. And turning towards basically what we see today, right, where most people work in either factories or service work, but very few people actually work in direct contact, right, with their livelihood. Right? So I guess by 1844, right, so about 50 years after our period from last week, 50 to 60 years, Turner comes out with a painting like this. Right? What does this tell you about the time that he's painting this in? Right? We're going to get into it, and I will give more details, but based off of what do you gather from the era that he's painting this in, just from this painting? What does it tell you? Because I would argue it says a lot.
There's a lot of darkness for sure.
Okay, good.
At
A
least
lot of
the train is very
darkness,
much darker.
perhaps.
No.
Yeah. Uh-huh. So good. The darkness. I'm sorry.
I think the train at least is darker than the rest.
Good. Uh-huh. Why would that matter?
But this is the symbol, right? Because with the all the technology came some actually uncertainty
Yes.
and something like blur, the darkness with all the technology and humanizing all the things, and
Yeah.
it's a kind of chaos, I guess.
Good. I like that. The use of chaos. Yeah. Or use. You can't use chaos by definition. Yeah. But
you
yeah.
can make some.
Yeah. You can make some. Yeah. Definitely. I think that's a really valid point of thinking of how we produce, and I'm using the term produce here in a very deliberate way, how we produce chaos, right? In many ways, the time that Turner was making this painting is a time in which we are, as humans, right, making the grounds for our own destruction, right? And that's not to say that life was perfect before that. That's really not what I'm saying, right? In many ways, I am glad to be living in the 21st century with like vaccines and shit. But just that convinces me that I'm happy to live in the 21st century. But the idea that Turner is definitely going for, right, is that you get, especially at this time, this image in popular imaginations of the train as this sleek engine of progress, right? Bringing in the future and a bright future at that, right? Progress, industrial productivity, right? And most people, especially the people who are benefiting most from this industrial progress, right? What last week we called the bourgeoisie, right? Broadly speaking, are the ones who very much push this image of the train as like this great engine of progress and modernity. Right? And Turner's kind of seeing a different view of this, right? It does not bring a clear future, right? It's going towards, we don't know where, right? We cannot see forward, right? Because of the steam that it causes, right? Of course, but also the steam that's produced around it, right? We actually don't know where the steam and fog from this image comes from. It could be from the train, of course, but it could be from anywhere else, right? There's no clear source of the hidden element behind it. Right, so I think Alicia and Marcio, your points on chaos are really, really good, right, and relevant. It's that it's not just one element that is causing this chaos. Yeah, it's the world around it that is in chaos somewhat, right, and the engine is just one version of this, right, one actor among many others. Okay. But the reason why I brought up this painting, and again, this will connect back to Heart of Darkness a little bit later, is because of the point that was brought up on the horizon, right? When we look at is the actual painting still up, or has my screen gone dark? Because sometimes my screen goes dark and I just don't want it to. Technically speaking, right, is the horizon before or after the train? Right, like where is the horizon positioned vis-a-vis the train? In the front or in the back?
I believe it's in the front.
In the front?
To the back.
Actually, I would have said on the side.
In the side.
Yeah, like this.
Uh-huh.
So like a little bit of front, a little bit of back, because it's like coming down.
I feel like it's
that
coming
means,
towards
like the lines are like this.
Actually, it comes in that direction
Yeah.
or that
Yeah,
direction.
It's coming to us, I think. It's like
It
Yeah,
comes
like
from
that.
Yeah, because I was imagining it was heading that direction there
okay,
to
yeah.
the horizon there.
Say side like this.
I think it's coming toward us.
Oh, that's awesome. This is really cool. Okay. Okay, so where do I begin with this? This is really awesome. So personally, when I looked at it, I imagined it in the back. But I can definitely see why you would not have a clear distinction of like where the horizon is, right? But think of it this way, right? Can a train go in many directions at once, or does it only go in one direction? Or like one axis, I should say. Yeah, it can go forward and backward.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So the reason why I'm talking about this in relation to the horizon, right, is again thinking of the train as symbolic. Yeah. The reason why the train is such a symbol, especially at this time, of progress and advancement is literally because of the directions that it goes in. It can only go forward into the future. Yeah. But and of course, like it can back up when it's getting into a station. But technically speaking, its goal is to only go forward, right? And people latch on to this idea, right, of it taking us into new and unforeseen sectors, right? Both temporally speaking, right? You're literally advancing forward into the future, right? But also geographically speaking, yeah. We can go places faster and farther away than ever before. Okay. But again, look at the Turner painting, and you're absolutely all correct. The horizon is unclear here, and I think that's part of the point that he's trying to make. Yeah. A lot of people are saying, well, no, it goes towards the future, but his train doesn't have a specific purpose, right? It doesn't have a specific endpoint, right? And crucially, everything that's left behind it, what in this metaphor we would consider the past, right? Everything that's literally behind progress, yeah, in the broadest sense, is left in the dust, right? There is no past left in this painting. It's literally a blank, chaotic space, yeah? The train itself disappears, right? The bridge that was brought up before disappears itself, right? So this is something that I think we need to keep in mind as we're going forward in this class, yeah? Is that we've been talking a lot about the environmental aspect, right, of planetary thought, and of course it's a major part of it, right? But one of the things that a lot of planetary thinkers are thinking about and thinking through is the idea of time as well, right? How we construct our notions of time and where they come from, right? And so instead of thinking as time as purely linear and progress-based, right, as we're inevitably going to a certain and clear future that is bright and cheery, right, we already start to see in the 19th century people starting to break that notion down a little bit, right? And you can take this into really two opposite directions, yeah? One is a very cynical view of the world, right? Which I try to avoid as much as possible, but at the same time, I live in the 21st century, and it's hard not to be cynical sometimes, yeah? Because it can be rather depressing to think that, the future and time, right, our understanding of past and present and future are kind of being destroyed around us by engines of modernity. But at the same time, it can be a very liberating thing, yeah? And this is something that we talked a little bit about in previous classes, but that I want to kind of fully introduce today and expand upon in later classes, especially, is that this idea of time as being very fixed, right, to a certain place and a certain idea is one that can productively be untangled, right? Productively, again, is perhaps a poor choice of words here. I'm not sure. I'm not sure what else to use quite effectively, but it's something that we can kind of think through as offering a lot of potential for thinking about our place in this planet, right, and the planet's role in our own existence, right? Is that time is not direct. Right? To put it in. This is going to be a reference that I doubt anyone is ever going to understand. Has anyone here seen True Detective, the TV show? No? Okay. Never mind.
What do you call it again?
True Detective.
True Detective?
No.
4 seasons? Something
There's
like
4
that on
seasons.
Prime?
Yeah. Okay, so you've seen it. Or you know of it?
No,
Okay.
just the something. But
No.
is it good? Is it worth?
I like the first season is really great. It has what's his face, Matthew McConaughey in it.
Oh,
yeah, he's really good. Yeah. And apparently the 4th season is quite good. My partner saw it and she said it was really good.
It's very recent.
But Matthew McConaughey's character in that first season, I forget his name, but I'll just call him Matthew McConaughey.
It's Dustin Cole.
Yeah. I think Woody Harrelson's also in it.
Yes.
Yeah.
And Colin Farrell as well. I
Yeah.
guess.
I think he shows up in the second season.
Mhm.
Should watch that later.
Yeah, exactly.
I like that cast.
There's actually like a good planetary reading that could be had of the show,
And
but
But
the actors
it's
are
too much
good.
violence, right? Because I remember
it's very violent. Yeah, it's very violent.
I remember a trailer where Colin Farrell
Mm-hmm.
character
Mhm.
went to a house and hit
Yeah.
a boy's father right in front of the key.
Yeah.
And, that was too much, huh?
Yeah, it's a lot. So if you're not a fan of gratuitous violence, don't necessarily watch it. But it's a detective show where it's meant to be a
this is
murder
reality,
mystery.
actually.
Yeah, in some ways.
Yeah.
But the point why I'm bringing this up is not to. The reason why I'm bringing up time is because Matthew McConaughey's character in it is obsessed with Nietzsche, right? Who is also kind of thinking around this time as a philosopher. And he paraphrases Nietzsche in one of the episodes to say that time is a flat circle. Right. And that is a quote that has lived rent-free in my mind since I've actually seen that episode and that clip. And time is a flat circle.
Flat. Flat is the word.
Right. And it doesn't mean necessarily that history repeats itself, right? That it comes back over and over again, right? But that the horizon of possibilities, right, and the way that we understand time and progress is constantly moving forward is wrong, right? At least for Nietzsche and a lot of contemporary thinkers, right? That it's better to think of time as something that doesn't have a clear delineation, right? Like where does a circle begin and end? And the point is never, right? So I think this is something that we've kind of gone away from the painting in and of itself, but that it gets at as a symbol, right? Is like we are living at this point where Heart of Darkness is being produced and the 19th century is kind of emerging as something with very specific ideals about the world. This is something that also comes with a lot of contradictions to it, right? And these contradictions can either be embraced and kind of exploded out from themselves, which is where thinkers like Hegel or Nietzsche or Marx would come in, right? But or just accepted and not dealt with in any critical fashion, which is where I think something like Heart of Darkness comes in. Okay. Which is not to say that this doesn't have the potential to be a very radical text in and of itself, but I think it also demonstrates just how much a lot of people at the time just kind of took for granted these ideas that Turner is trying to dismantle. Okay. So this was a lot, I'm sure. I see like scrunched faces and like very thoughtful faces. Does anyone have any questions or anything we want to add on to this? Because I just kind of like dumped this at 9 a.m.
I got a question.
Yeah, please.
What's the best season of this season?
I can only speak for the first one.
For the first one.
I can only speak for the first one. That's the only one I've seen, and I really enjoyed it. Apparently, season 2 and 3 are good, but not as good. And apparently, season 4 is really excellent, but I haven't seen it.
That's really rare. Usually, I say that the first one is pretty good. The second one is better because somehow they have much more money.
Yeah, right.
And it ends pretty badly in general.
Yeah, but
I'm never satisfied with endings.
The advantage of True Detective is that each season is a new story entirely with a new cast, so they can like reboot entirely. Yeah, it's kind of like Doctor Who. Yeah, again, another one that has a lot of potential for the premises of this class.
Yeah, no kidding.
I hesitated actually to like, should we do a Doctor Who episode at some point, and I decided against it because where do you even begin? There's like 60 million seasons of that show, and I don't want to start that.
Somehow it's difficult to put it in context or anything because you just have to go with it because much things do not make sense in that show. You're just go with it. It's okay.
But again, when we're thinking do we all know about Doctor Who?
I don't.
Ish.
It's a British show. You know the cabin, telephone cabin that's blue.
It's a police box.
I'll just.
So you know those old police boxes in Great Britain that are they look like blue telephone boxes, but they were meant specifically for police emergencies. Yeah. Anyway, so he travels around. He's a time traveling alien, basically, right? So it's perfect actually for our class, right? Where he's never grounded on Earth.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Says something to you?
Yeah.
Because it's the blue box.
He's never grounded on Earth, and his little blue box is a time machine that can go at any point in time and space. Right, so he's completely unmoored by linear time, right, in a really interesting way. So anyway, but this is not. We're getting off topic again. So, any other classes aside from any other classes? Any other questions aside from what my favorite season of True Detective is?
I'm waiting to see where it goes to Heart of Darkness.
Okay, good. So before we formally get into Heart of Darkness, did everyone have a chance to read the Spivak text? No?
Some pages, I guess.
A few pages of it? Okay. Leonie, did you have a chance to read any of it?
I did.
Okay. Some or all of it?
I read all of it.
Okay. How about you, Ling? Did you read the Planetarity theory?
I do, but not complete.
Okay, good. I just wanted to the reason why I suggested this not only because what's her face Spivak explicitly mentions Heart of Darkness and kind of unpacks it through her lens, but also because she is mostly the first to think through this concept of planetarity. Right. In our first and second classes, we kind of alluded to planetarity as a concept tangentially. Right. But Spivak is the first thinker that we're going to actively consider as someone who is thinking about what it means to think planetarily, right, as opposed to globally. Okay. And I think it's notable that she uses Heart of Darkness as an example of where global thinking, if not begins, certainly solidifies, right? And it gives her a really good idea of what to work against, right, when thinking planetarily. Okay. So for those of you who read it, and we're not going to spend a whole lot of time on that, I just want to use it as a kind of basis for the rest of our class going forward. For those of you who read it, or parts of it, what would you say is Spivak's understanding of the planetary? By the way, I just remembered, but when you were mentioning Derrida, and she does bring up Derrida in this one as well. Yeah, she's a big fan of him. She's actually the first one to have translated Derrida into English.
Okay.
And one of his works
Interesting.
Of grammatology, she's the one who translated it for the first time. Yeah. Sorry, Marcio, you looked like you were going to...
Actually, I was just thinking about about this writer here.
Spivak.
There's a lot going on because of the place where she comes from. And I think this is the perfect scenery in order to start writing things like this. Yes, because I'm not saying this is a bad country or something. Or because I think she has a privileged view of things living there.
Yeah.
And then
when you say there, where do you mean?
Calcutta.
Yeah, so she lives in
a place. Yeah,
yeah, and I think she's been living in the U.S. for a bit now.
Yeah, but her origins and she's
Indian.
There are people, her people there, and what else? She knows how the things work there, and she can see the Western view and how the Western see her culture, the way of her people lives and things like that.
Yeah.
And there is a lot, but actually that's the point I would like to be sure about her work here. why exactly she picked up this book here?
Yeah.
This work here.
Why she picked up Heart of Darkness?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
That's the point.
Good. So I'm looking at. I don't know. I don't remember if you have the same page numbers. I'm looking at page 72 of this is Death of a Discipline, right? Where I got the Planetarity text. I'm looking at the Spivak text here. On page 72 of her text, so the second page in. Right? I think I'll read this passage, and I think it will answer your question by extension, Marcio. I'll extend off of it.
Sure.
So she writes at the beginning, right? I propose the planet to overwrite the globe. Right? Globalization is the imposition of the same system of exchange everywhere. Do we all see that space where I'm reading? Okay, good. In the gridwork of electronic capital, we achieve that abstract ball covered in latitudes and longitudes, cut by virtual lines, once the equator and the tropics and so on, now drawn by the requirements of the geographical information system. To talk planet talk by way of an unexamined environmentalism, referring to an undivided quote-unquote natural space, rather than a differentiated political sphere, can work in the interest of this globalization in the mode of the abstract as such. So she has a very complicated writing style, so I know it's not easy necessarily, but I'll unpack this in a sec. I'm just skipping a few lines here. The globe is on our computers. No one lives there. It allows us to think that we can aim to control it. The planet is in the species of alterity, belonging to another system, and yet we inhabit it on loan. It is not really amenable to a neat contrast with the globe. I cannot say, quote-unquote, the planet, on the other hand. When I invoke the planet, I think of the effort required to figure the impossibility of this underived intuition. So, to answer your question, Marcio, the reason why she brings up Heart of Darkness specifically is because she sees it as channeling, right, this globalization impulse, right? This idea that we can firmly understand and clearly define certain aspects of this floating ball of water and rock in space, right, is something that you see explicitly at play in Heart of Darkness. Okay? And that's kind of what her perspective is kind of going off of in this case. Okay. A little bit later, she goes on a little bit. Actually, it would have been fun if Francesca were here today, because she took my class last semester where we talked about the weird and the uncanny, which she brings up in this thing. But she brings it up a little bit later. So this is on page 81, right, where she touches upon Heart of Darkness. Right, she explicitly says, Heart of Darkness and its themes belong to European national colonialisms. Right, and that specific sentence really gets at the heart of what she's talking about, right? Does that answer your question?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, good.
Crystal clear.
Yeah, awesome. Sometimes I'm afraid that I'm not clear because I go in like all kinds of directions. So I apologize if that's the case. Any other questions or uncertainties about Spivak?
Well, I read this only once.
Yeah.
And so if I would have read it more times, probably I would have understood it better. But I feel like, and tell me if I'm wrong, but the vocabulary she uses makes it feel like it's a concept that she's throwing into the world, but she isn't quite sure yet how to approach it.
That's 100% true.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was I don't know if it's my reading or
That's 100% true. And if ever you do continue reading Spivak, which I do recommend, she's every once in a while, right, there's a book that kind of really lights a fire in academia. And for some reason, it seems like Spivak is always one of those books. Because of her fearlessness of like just launching a concept out there and seeing what works or what doesn't right around it. She was very well known for a text that she wrote called Can the Subaltern Speak? Right, which she brings up the concept of the subaltern very briefly in this. And it was very influential in post-colonial studies, right? So, but you're right. She's basically trying out this idea of planetary.
No, that's it. Yeah, so it made it a little bit confusing, but also it was interesting. So you like feel like you're at the start of like this exchange about a new concept. But I feel like she often like opposes the idea of like planetarity to nation.
Yes.
Or nationalism, which I thought was interesting.
Why would she do that?
Because like nation, it kind of is like that human sentiment or that human attempt to like put boundaries between certain people and to like, I don't know how to explain it, but I don't know if it makes sense.
Okay, and this relates to Heart of Darkness. We're going to come back to this. So you're absolutely correct, Leonie, in saying that it's unclear kind of where she's going, and she admits it herself at some point. She's like, this is super conceptual, right? Like, I'm just launching ideas and going from one text to another. She admits it. And I think this is important, and there's a reason why I gave this text alongside Heart of Darkness, is because I think on the level of form, they mirror themselves in really interesting ways, right? Heart of Darkness is a bit of an unruly text, and we're going to spend the rest of class today after our quick break talking about it as much as possible. But you're right, and I'm just going to draw what is probably the worst like Africa that anyone has ever like drawn in their life. Here, we'll add Madagascar just to like be fair with it, like a series of islands on the side. Okay, so let's pretend this is not the worst thing imaginable. And when you're bringing up the concept of planet versus nation, and this is kind of bring us back into Heart of Darkness. She's thinking of a time when not only are we able to map something like this, right, actually put it on a piece of paper, right, in a clear and delineated fashion, right, so, but also, right, and I'm actually not clear if the borders are actually like that, but probably not on some level. We're formally doing an even greater division, right? I'm trying to imagine like what the country. There's obviously many more countries than this in Africa, right? And so when she is imagining nationalism, right, or nations and nationalisms, she's imagining this act, right, that I just put on, right? Imagining that the planet is made for human divisions, like the one on the blackboard behind us, right? Where the planet cares about the differences between the people living here and the people living 1 mile later, right? On technically a different nation. So yeah, it is a very anti-national, in some sense, right? Concept, right? The planetary, which is not to say that Spivak doesn't think that there are differences in cultures, right? She wouldn't say that necessarily, right? She does recognize that there are differences in how people and societies engage with one another, of course, right? But she's using the nation idea and the idea of nationalism to describe this act of dividing up in what seems like arbitrary ways, right? But also to come back to the idea of contradiction, very precise and delineated ways, right? The world. And that's what she means by globe, right? Globe is the planet made for humans, whereas planetary for her, as in the passage that I read, is its concept on its own, right? It's separated from humans.
It reminded me of the first class when we talked about the what was it? It was
The Death Alley in
that's
Louisiana.
it.
Yeah.
And how we compared the like line and flow of the river
Yes. Yeah.
against like the lines of the like colonialism.
Yeah.
And, like that's what it made me think of. In a way.
Yeah.
Little rectangle.
Yeah, you'd sent me an email about it, like the Louisiana thing, the website. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
The way like the land was divided,
And how the river just split through it.
So this is a lot that we just covered in like 55 minutes. So do we want to take like a quick break, get some water, coffee, and then come back and talk about Heart of Darkness for the rest?
Pomodoro style, right?
I'm sorry?
Pomodoro
style. Yeah, Pomodoro style. Just for a little bit of...
Like that.
Yeah, sure. Okay, cool. Come back in like 5-10 minutes and we'll kick back off. I'm just going to get myself some water. Marcia, did you want to talk about the evaluations, just to be clear, or a little bit later? Okay. Two major things that you need to know. Okay, let's kick things off again. Okay, so let me just close the syllabus here. We don't need it. I have a little clip that I'm going to show you, but I'm not sure when I want to show it. Maybe later. Another movie clip. Let me just open up my notes here. So I guess the best place to begin with Heart of Darkness proper. Last bit of context. The year of its publication is rather important. So this was published formally. I say it's important, then I kind of...
Was it 1890?
Yeah, 1898, 1899. Yeah. The reason why I bring this up is in part because of what I drew behind us. Right? This is a moment in colonial history that is known broadly as the scramble for Africa. Right? And I think it very much embodies this, even if it doesn't reference it super explicitly, although there are some minor references to it with the mapping section, right, which we can get to. And basically, it's the act of going into the heart of Africa, right? Because before the 1890s, this is something you may or may not know, but European colonization was mostly contained to the borders, right? Not the borders, the coast, I should say. Right? Broadly speaking, there are some exceptions, but the general idea is that you set up mercantile outposts, right? And usually what happens is that people or ships come in from Europe, right? And stop somewhere on the coast. Have any of you ever been to Senegal before? No. There's an island just off of Senegal, which now is called Illosis.
And isn't it Cabo Verde?
It's there is that, but no, it's not that one. It's literally called Slave Island, would be the translation. Yeah, which is where ships would stop, right? Disembark, trade for slaves on the coast, right? Put them back up and head to the New World, right? So for a long time, that kind of worked for Europeans, right? Never having to go formally into the coast into the mainland, I should say, of Africa, right? Because they had people that would bring, slaves to them from across the continent, I guess. In the 1890s, and this is where it starts to matter for the context of our class, what we start to see is not only an interest in slaves, of course, develop. Slave labor, because formally slavery is abolished by the time that Conrad is writing, right? Technically speaking. but there's still some kind of like forced labor happening. What you start to see is an interest in the resources that are inside the continent itself, right? I brought up last week the idea that during Shelley, Blake, and so on's time, we're starting to see the formal like digging and mining into the core of the earth, yeah? And you see the same thing happening more and more in Africa in the 1890s, yeah? We realize that there's plenty of mining potential in that part of the world, right? Gold, for example, coal, etc. Right? Later, oil, right? Which we will come back to time and time again in this class, right? Black gold, as they call it. So this, and of course, as the cover of this book implies, right? It's not just like mineral resources, but also animal resources, right? And this is explicit in the text itself, right? With the ivory trade, right? That's happening. So the concept of mining the planet, right, and therefore turning it into the globe, right, which is just to use, I guess, Spivak's own terminology, is kind of what we're seeing at this time. Right, which comes back to your question, Marcio, earlier of like why she talks about this. I would argue that it's really the formalization of the transforming into the globe, right? As Spivak understands it, contra the planet, which is what she's hoping for. Right? Okay. Any questions about this like very brief context? I didn't want to spend too much time on it, but yeah, just anything that we wanted to add or make sure of? Okay. Where to begin with Heart of Darkness? It's such a bizarre text, I guess, because it's so short, right? Depending on the version, as Alicia was saying, it's either 50 pages or about 70 pages-ish, right? 50 to 70, we'll say. And yet there's so many like different elements that we can touch upon in it. So I'm just assuming that we're not going to touch upon every single possible thing that we can in this text. But I think one place to start is in what I talked about before the break, which is the form, right, of the text. What would we say? Yeah, I guess what would we say is the form of this text, right? What structure, formalistic element can we bring up about Heart of Darkness, right? There's a frame narrative, for example, like how is the story told? What can we say about that? I think that's as good a place to start as any.
So to me, it was a little unclear at first.
Yeah.
Because it started like a conversation, I felt like.
Between who?
The 4 or 5 foremen on the boat. But then...
Sailors.
Yeah.
Yeah, sailors talking.
Exactly. And then Marlowe just began to, like, tell a story.
Yes.
So it feels like him telling his story or his personal adventure. So, but also sometimes it feels like he's not the one doing the narration. So
Good. Yes.
I'm kind of confused about that.
Yeah, but you are right. That's exactly what happens, right? It starts off with sailors, to use a colloquial term, shooting the shit, right? Which is what we call, right, in English, just having casual conversations, swapping stories, you know? And then we spend most of Heart of Darkness telling a story within a story. Right? It's Marlowe going back and recounting his experience
as a kid.
It's not as a kid, but it was a few years past, right? I don't remember if they explicitly mention a time, how long ago it was for him. If someone has that answer off the top of their head, great. But he wasn't a child per se, but yeah, it was a few years past. Yeah. Yeah, and where does he go in the context of the story within the story? What is the Heart of Darkness?
Well, to answer that, I actually did the research on Google because I was not sure.
It's never explicitly said.
No, exactly, but they generally, they said Congo probably.
It is the
because
Congo.
it is pretty much where the
Yeah,
there's
I
the-
didn't
the
try
curve.
it, but like, yeah, it's
It's
in the middle.
kind of like there.
Yeah.
So yeah.
In the literal heart, right? But there's also other, there are other reasons that can tell us, or there are other elements that can tell us that it's the Congo. Namely, the fact that when he is hired, he goes to Belgium, right? He mentions that at some point, and Belgium, the Belgians only had one colony in Africa, and it was the Congo. Right? Famously horrible place, as if any like colonized place was not horrible, but apparently, and this is what Conrad is critiquing, right? Apparently, the Congo was the worst of the worst where that's concerned, right? Okay, good. So we have that frame narrative, right? Stories within stories. And we kind of cut back and forth throughout Heart of Darkness between Marlowe telling the story and a few years in the past where Marlowe is recounting his actual experience in the Congo, right? And then at the end, we come back to a brief conversation between him and other people, including Kurtz's wife, right? Or one-time wife. Okay. Why does he actually go into the Congo? Right? What's the purpose of the exploration into the Congo? We'll just call it the Congo, even if it's not even said. But I think it's better than saying the Heart of Darkness every time. So why does he actually go there? What's the point of his trip? That might be a little bit trickier to answer.
Yeah.
I think Vijay said he has a deep desire to explore meaning or things, and he said he was attracted by the river sea.
Mm-hmm. So on the one hand, there is like a deep curiosity about this thing, right? And the concept of darkness here takes on a new valence, right? You can write a whole paper, by the way, on like what darkness is in this book, because it takes on many different meanings throughout, right? So I think you're absolutely right, Ling. One of them is just the sheer curiosity, right, that you would have about this presumably mysterious place, right, that Europeans are colonizing but actually don't know much about, right, quote unquote. So yeah, absolutely, there is sheer curiosity. What else brings him into the Congo? Why is he hired, per se?
I think it has something to do with the Kurtz being, or was it the outpost being attacked and Kurtz being weird?
It's the same kind of thing, yeah.
Because of it, or he was kind of fell off the map, like
yeah. Okay, so
like
so say more about Kurtz. Who is he? What? Lian, you're shaking your head as if like you have no idea.
Yeah. Well.
Yeah.
No, then just a few lines I read.
Yeah.
It was Kurtz was adored by the natives from there.
Yeah.
But he was kind of getting crazy.
Yeah.
And he put something like 7 heads in front of his office or something like that.
Yep. By the way, because we're all, you're absolutely right. Just while I'm thinking of it, because we're all working, I think, from different versions, right? Electronic or different editions. If you do reference a specific passage, just say which part you're in, right? Because there's 3 parts.
Oh.
No, it's fine. Don't worry about it now. I just thought of it now.
Okay.
You're right. Specific chapter that you're talking about, and maybe like the first line of the paragraph, just so we can all like get to the same place-ish. But yes, you're right. Kurtz, according at least to the colonial masters in Belgium, has kind of gone cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, right? To put it in that, right? And but then you see once you're on the ground that it's a bit of a different story, right? You're right, Marcio, where according to at least the people there, he's had a kind of cult following build up around him, right? Which again, right, when we're talking about contradictions in the colonial mindset, this is kind of one of them, right? Kurtz is someone who was hired originally as an ivory, right, resource, an ivory finder, right. His whole point was to manage an ivory outpost, and he kind of, to use the terms of the time, went native, quote unquote, right, which is a really interesting thing to unpack, right, because the whole point of the colonial project is to destroy the native, bring civilization and progress to the quote-unquote native. You were wondering, Alicia, why we started talking about the train. This is maybe why you can start thinking about it again, right? What exactly it means to bring progress to a place like the Congo. Right? And instead of actually bringing this so-called progress, he instead turns on, right, whatever colonial master he has and goes native, so to speak. Good. Anything else that we want to say about just as early thoughts? Yeah, go ahead.
That would be too much to say that Marlowe would be something like Planetarity, and Kurtz should be something like the global agent. And
okay, interesting. Yay! We're kind of like I was kind of like leading up to that, but sure, let's go into this now. Say more about that. How would you justify this? Because I think you're absolutely right on some level.
At the end, when Marlowe get back to and talk to his fiancée, and he didn't say the expression there, the horror, and he kind of used some euphemism there to talk about a curse in order to make up the situation or have a better version of this person to his fiancée. However, Kurtz was not like that. He was a bad person.
Yeah,
and he was doing all the things that the globalization is expected to do.
Yeah,
and that's the thing.
Yeah, Kurtz is really interesting. You're absolutely right, because you could almost make an argument either way, right? That Marlowe is more of the planetary figure and Kurtz the more globalization figure, or vice versa, right? And I think you can kind of, with time, right? And this, again, if you want to like write your final essay about this, I think there would definitely be something to unpack there. You could probably make the opposite argument as well, right? Insofar as, Kurtz coming to realize just what he's doing, right? What is the horror that he's talking about, right? It comes up many times during the story, right? And it's never explicitly said what the horror is, right? And you can even make an argument for Kurtz that he becomes more planetary in the descriptions that are made of him, right? How is he described in the story?
Very charming.
He's charming, but physically speaking, right? He has some very particular bodily descriptions. I'll try to find the passage here.
Just remember when he was sick.
Yes. Okay, so good. Yeah, he's sick.
He's super tall.
Super tall.
Mm-hmm.
Where am I going to find this?
There is a study I read a couple of years ago that tall people tend to be more intelligent than just something stupid that crosses my mind.
Ah, good.
Yeah?
Yeah, I heard that they die faster.
But I don't agree, of course.
Look, as a tall person who gets injured a lot, I could very much see why we would die faster. Here we go. But there is something. We'll come back to that tall thing, because there's probably something to unpack there. But there's a few... I'm looking at page 59 here of my version, which is part 3. The paragraph that begins, Now, if he does not say the right thing to them, going forward. So if you're looking up, that's where I'm looking. Towards the middle of part 3, I would say. And it starts, Kurtz. That means short in German, don't it? Well, the name was as true as everything else in his life and death. He looked at least 7 feet tall, right? That's what you were saying. His covering had fallen off, and his body emerged from it pitifully and appalling, as from a winding sheet. I could see the cage of his ribs all astir, the bones of his arm waving. It was as though an animated image of death, carved out of old ivory, had been shaking its hand with menaces at a motionless crowd of men made of dark and glittering bronze. So when we say that, you could also make an argument of Kurtz as a kind of bizarre planetary figure as well as global one, depending on like which perspective you want to take. This is the kind of passage that I'm thinking of, where you see him going beyond the human, so to speak. Yeah, he's being compared not only to, material, animalistic material like ivory, right? The tusks of elephants. But also, right, his arms waving. He's kind of like a bird-like figure, right, in that sense. And there are a few moments where they kind of compare him to like rising out as if he's being reborn, maybe from an egg or something like that. That's maybe reading it a little bit too much into it, but there are these brief moments where he seems to like almost get close to being like a more than human figure, which I think might be another way of thinking about this. And Kurtz is a perhaps planetary figure, right? And even like if you go on, right, I saw him open his mouth wide. It gave him a weirdly voracious aspect, right? Kind of like a vulture, so to speak. That's what I'm thinking of, at least in my imagination here, right? But I think you're absolutely right, Marcio, right? These characters are bizarrely contradictory, but also I really like this idea of, right, one of them being global, the other planetary in some kind of sense, right? Which is what I think is kind of interesting about Heart of Darkness. If you want, we can talk about it, but I think for the context of this class, it's perhaps less relevant per se, but it can be, right? We talk a lot in Heart of Darkness, especially in undergrad classes, about the racism in it, right? The explicit use of the explicit like description, I guess, of Black Africans as being particularly vile in the context of the story, and there's a lot to unpack there. But I think definitely the more environmental and planetary aspect is one that's very rarely developed, and that's why I kind of suggested it for this class, right? But of course, like the racism can fit in with. We talked about the Louisiana Project earlier, right? And in the first week, there's a straight connection to be made there, right? Okay, good. What else can we say about Marlowe and Kurtz as planetary or global figures? This is really good. I think we should unpack that a little bit more. There's then more stuff that I want to unpack, but from a more like straightforward environmental perspective, right? Well, I guess it kind of fits in with what Marlowe was saying, but yeah. Okay, so let's do that. What is Marlowe like as a character? Like, what do we gather from him? So you mentioned he's somewhat planetary, Marcio. That's good. But what else can we say about him? Like, give details about what else we can say about him as a character. Nothing else.
Well, he admires Kurtz.
Good.
For sure.
Why?
He really wants to meet him.
Yeah, it's weird, like
Why?
his obsession before meeting him.
Uh-huh. Why? Okay, keep going. This is really good,
Yeah.
and this is relevant.
Well,
Yeah,
he
so
imagines him only like as a. Is it as a voice at first, or
yeah, he's kind of like a what's the term? Disconnected or disembodied
yeah?
person. Yeah, definitely.
That's it.
Good, 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 good. And he only hears like from secondary sources at first,
Yeah.
right? What Kurtz is like, both from the people in Europe, right, in Belgium that he meets as like a very capable person and manager and eventual cult leader. But then also in the people at the outpost, right, describing him as particularly charismatic,
Yeah.
right? And oh my God, you should hear him recite poetry. It's incredible, right? Again, it's not entirely unfounded, right, as to why Conrad is putting this in, right? Poetry was kind of seen as the highest form of art at the time. It was starting to kind of slowly be overtaken by novels, but still it was considered like a rather high form of art. So Marlowe is, you're right, slowly associating him with this larger than life ideal, right? Romanticized in the literal sense of the adjective, not in the romantic sense necessarily that we talked about last week, right? Very good, right? Very good. So what effect does this have on Marlowe to romanticize him and idealize him in such a way, right? What does this tell us about Marlowe as a figure of either global or planetary, depending on what your perspective is?
That's the thing. Being planetary is too under my conception.
Yeah.
The little I read.
Please.
And being planetary is something like that. Feel attracted by what is different and respect to that.
Good.
It doesn't matter if Curse is there exploring something like that, but he has something of relevance, something that's supposed to be good for the culture and things like that. That's the idea. Well, that's why I think Marlowe is attracted by Kurtz.
Yeah, good. So we brought up this idea of like unknown a few times, right? What does it mean in the context of the story? Right. So both Ling and Marcio, you brought up some interesting concepts. And I think just to put it concretely onto the blackboard, this idea of the unknown is one that's right there at the front of the text, right, and can either be taken in a very positive or negative sense, right? I think you're right, Marcio, to say that for a lot of planetary thinkers, and don't worry about like when you say like from your conception of it, the whole point of this class is that we're kind of unpacking what that means, the planetary. So we're going to spend the next 10 weeks unpacking. So the unknown, right, can either be an embrace of the unknown, right? Oh, this is fantastic, the sublime that we were talking about last week, and it's terrifying, but also that's just a part of living on this planet, right? So that would be the positive sense. The negative sense would be, right, the more colonial mindset. As something to master. Yeah. How would we put it? The positive sense, I guess. Yeah. So here's where the Kurtz and Marlowe contradiction kind of comes in the context of this class, right? Is that you're right in saying that on the one hand, he does kind of see Kurtz as a figure of admiration because of the unknown, right? Which is what you see in a lot of contemporary planetary environmental thought. But also, he admires him because he was kind of able to master some aspect of himself and others. Yeah. He was very, I think they mention it a few times in the story from what I remember. They mention how efficient he was at his job, right? How good he was at extracting ivory. He literally manages to become master of a little cult following, right? Of local local Congolese and other people, right? Other colonists.
Mhm.
So there's a kind of contradiction here in the context of Heart of Darkness. Good, very good. I really like that reading. And you see this. Hold on, let me find where it is so I can quote from it. Da-da-da. I'm looking at the. Here we go. Okay, so you see this in Marlowe, not just with Kurtz and his view of Kurtz, right, as this kind of nebulously enticing figure, yeah, but also in the way that he conceives of the African continent. Do we remember where he talks about maps? He talks about maps twice.
Beginning.
Right.
Yeah.
At the beginning, he says two distinct things about maps that I think really get to the heart of what we're talking about here.
The blind spot.
Good.
On the map.
Good. So this is, for me, it's part one, of course, maybe 4 pages in.
Mm-hmm.
The paragraph that starts, "Now, when I was a little chap, I had a passion for maps. I would look for hours at South America, or Africa, or Australia, and lose myself in all the glories of exploration. At that time, there were many blank spaces on the earth, and when I saw one that looked particularly inviting on a map, but they all looked like that, I would put my finger on it and say, when I grow up, I will go there." And then a little bit later, this is maybe 2 pages later, when he's in Brussels. Yeah, here we go. Where he talks about the map in a way that contrasts. This is at the start. The paragraph starts with "a narrow and deserted street in deep shadow." Around halfway through that paragraph, he says, yeah, here we go. "On one end, a large shining map marked all the colors of a rainbow. There was a vast amount of red, good to see at any time because one knows that some real work is done in there. A deuce and a lot of blue, a little green, smears of orange, and on the east coast, a purple patch to show where the jolly pioneers of progress drink the jolly lager beer. However, I wasn't going into any of these. I was going into the yellow, dead in the center, and the river was there, fascinating, deadly, like a snake." And so it's not, I wouldn't say it's a stretch to say that in the context of the story, right, when we see that Kurtz is being explicitly tied to the land, right, in the passage that I read earlier with the ivory, and that Marlowe, I should say, would explicitly make similar connections between his appeal towards the unknown that he sees on the map and the unknown that he sees in Kurtz. Right? There's a kind of colonial attraction that's happening on this level that I think gets at a lot of what we're talking about right here. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay. Sorry, you looked like you were going to say something.
No, I was just happy that I finished my sentence.
Okay. Sometimes I feel like because you're writing down so many things that I just say off the cuff, I feel like you should just have transcriptions going at all times and just have the text there. Okay, good. So, one of the reasons why, actually, no, I'll start this sentence again. Let's think back then to the start of the class when I showed you the painting. Right? To answer Alicia's question, but I'm opening it up to everyone. why would I relate this painting to Heart of Darkness? What is the connection there between the Turner painting and Heart of Darkness?
Maybe that if we go back to like the horizon and the train leaving it, thing, maybe that it doesn't only lead to progress in a sense. Like what they're doing is like damaging more than it is.
Good. So there's one level of that. Absolutely. Right? So do we actually see a train in Heart of Darkness? Good. A steamboat. Yeah. Good.
It's like another form.
Yeah, it's the water version of the steam train.
Yeah, they came together with the steam engines.
Yeah, absolutely. Good. Right? So there's the steamboat going into the river, right? Yeah. And on the literal level, right, it again follows the river in a very linear way, right? Good. Excellent. And how does this kind of chaos that you're coming into, like this discombobulation, how does that shine through in Heart of Darkness per se, right? How do we get that intimation in Heart of Darkness? Because there's a few moments. Yeah.
I believe the train symbolizes the progress, the civilization coming through.
Good.
And this is the very same thing when the guys actually arrive in Congo. This is the so-called civilization arriving, and maybe there is the connection between this the picture there and the Heart of Darkness.
Good. So they're literally the symbol of civilization, right? In the European imagination of the context of this book, right? And are they met with happy people when they arrive in Africa the first time? There's something that happens.
No, they're not happy.
They're not happy, right? There's a moment of violence that happens, right? What happens explicitly?
They get attacked. I think it's when they're on the boat.
Yeah, they do get attacked. Yeah, straight up.
Arrows.
Yeah, the arrows.
Yeah, they're spears. Yeah. Yeah, they're literally attacked by, what we know are natives. But do we ever actually, crucially, see the people who attack?
No, aren't they hidden in the fog?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, they are hidden in the fog, right? Okay, so let's find this passage because it's really good. Hold on. Yes, these are good connections that you're making. Okay, if you find it before me where they actually get attacked, just say it. Okay. No, I think I went too far.
I think it's part 2.
Is it part 2?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's not too far.
So I'm at page 52, and they're saying that the big fog was one.
Okay, so that's the start of it.
I think it's the end. I did not think they would attack for several obvious reasons.
Okay, good.
But I have 100 pages in this edition, so it's like right in the middle.
Had swept us on the riverbank, the savage clamor that had swept us on the riverbank behind the blind whiteness of the fog. Yeah. Okay, so, I did not think they would attack us for several obvious reasons. The thick fog was one. If they left the bank in their canoes, they would get lost in it, as we would be if we attempted to move. Still, I had also judged the jungle of both banks quite impenetrable, and yet eyes were in it. Eyes that had seen us. The riverside bushes were certainly very thick, but the undergrowth behind was evidently penetrable. However, during the short lift, I had seen no canoes anywhere in the reach. certainly not abreast of the steamer. But what made the idea of attack inconceivable to me was the nature of the noise, of the cries we had heard. They had not the fierce character boding of immediate hostile intention. Unexpected, wild, and violent as they had been, they had given me an irresistible impression of sorrow. The glimpse of the steamboat had, for some reason, filled those savages with unrestrained grief. The danger, if any, I expounded, was from our proximity to a great human passion let loose. Even extreme grief may ultimately vent itself in violence, but more generally takes the form of apathy. So we don't actually. So this is just one passage, and then it goes on, right, with the whole thing. But we don't actually, right, see humans attack, right? We get the spears, right, that we were talking about, and we get their voices, but we never actually see humans, which gives a very distinct impression of this moment, right? That it's the continent itself that's attacking.
I'm sorry, what did you say?
That it's the continent itself that's attacking them.
Oh,
But at least that's my reading of it. You might disagree. That's fine. But at least that's the impression that I got, right? Because we don't see the humans, you hear them, but they're disembodied, right? They're over there. So it's the fog that's covering up and attacking and stopping, quote unquote, at least in Marlowe's mind, their progress, right? And even the bushes, right? They're very thick, right? And he's kind of judging that they're penetrable, but it would be rather difficult to get into this land. And it's untamed, right? Unexpected, wild, violent, right? All of these elements kind of combine to make a Congo, at least in the version that Conrad depicts, a Congo that's thoroughly antagonistic to their arrival there. And I think that's worth considering. Right? And it's usually taken in one of two ways, right, by critics of the story. Either it's taken as an example of Conrad's anti-imperialism, because he was very critical of Belgian imperialism in the Congo. And he's saying, like, see, they don't want you here, right? So stop. On the other hand, it's also taken as an example of Conrad's insistence on the values of European progress, right? That this is a quote-unquote savage and untamed and violent place that needs the civilizing mission in order to make it habitable and make it hospitable to European civilization. That's up to you to decide which one it is, right? As I said, this is one of the reasons why last week I qualified this as a problematic fave of mine, because there's you can really take it in both ways, right? I don't know if anyone had anything that they wanted to add on to what I just said, or that they wanted to insist upon and unpack a little bit, but I think at least is something that's worth mentioning, right?
I find it interesting also, like, as much as Marlowe cannot see them,
yeah,
he always, like, he uses a few times the idea that their eyes could see them, which is, I don't know exactly what to make of that, but is it like that the nature or the place has an understanding of them that can't be reciprocated, that they can't.
Ooh, that's good. Unpack that. What, like, yeah, no.
But it's, yeah, I'm...
Okay, when you say them, right?
Of the Europeans arriving, but I don't know, like, exactly.
In the sense of, like, yeah, that they can, like, nature or the natives can see them, but they can't see back. They can't be seen back.
What is it?
Okay.
He says it's like, and yet eyes were in it.
Mm-hmm.
Eyes that had seen us.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's that idea here. Then later, I think there's another.
Oh yes. Okay.
You should have seen the pilgrims stare.
Mm-hmm.
Like an exclamation mark.
Yeah.
Like they feel like there's this eye upon them, or this. I don't know if it's like their inner, like guilt, or like this sense that maybe what they're doing isn't the right thing to do, or I don't know what to make of it.
Yeah, and I think
they're conscious.
Like maybe they're like unconsciously, like they read nature as like having this judgment.
Oh yeah.
Over them. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just asking.
Oh yeah, I think that's definitely part of the subtext.
It's like interesting.
Yeah, and the fact that they're the passage that you brought up, they're pilgrims, right? They're missionaries in this case, right? Who are there to bring the glorious word of Jesus Christ into the heart of Africa. I should mention, like, this is uber sarcastic on my part. That wasn't like clear. Anyway, so. But yeah, and it is a thoroughly conscious mission that they're going on, right? Of wanting to go into this place to convert locals, and they cannot make sense of what they are seeing, right? Which I guess is a kind of irony, because their religion is based off of, right, believing in something that's not there. Right, or not materially there, and believing in an afterlife of some kind, right, and the faith that you will be rewarded in the afterlife. And yet, when faced with that in a material sense, right, in a very real sense of just not knowing what is out there, right, in the planet around you, it's terrifying for them. Yeah, absolutely. So I think your notion of the eyes, right, that are staring into something that they cannot see, and yet they are being stared back at, either by nature or the natives, which Conrad kind of conflates the two in a very colonial move, by the way, like the association of local indigenous populations as if they were like prehistoric, right? Mm-hmm. He makes that claim throughout in a very racist move, right? In this case, but it's still an interesting turn that happens. I think you're very right to point that out. Definitely. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Ling, I don't know. Did you have anything that you wanted to add? Or did I misread your look? It's fine if no. You look like you wanted to say something. Okay. Good stuff. There was something else that I wanted to talk about. Yes. What time did we pick back up again? Like 9:30, 9:35? 35. Okay. I will ask one question, and then we'll take a break to get some more water. You don't need to answer now, but during the break, I would like you to think about this, which I think is a key to understanding a lot of the points that you rightfully brought up. When Kurtz exclaims, right, or whispers, to put it in the term of the book, the horror, right, which, if you haven't seen Apocalypse Now, is very well delivered by Marlon Brando, who plays the Kurtz character in that movie. What is he talking about? What is the horror? The horror. I should learn to enunciate that a little bit more so that it doesn't sound like I'm saying something awful, but yeah, the horror. So I think it's a question that is worth unpacking for a bit. And you can maybe even think of why he repeats it throughout. right? Not just Marlowe, but Kurtz says it more than once, and it's also doubled, right? Horror, all the time. So I'm gonna go get some water. Think about that during the break, and then we'll come back and unpack that.
Maximum like 15,
Yeah.
and last year we were like 30,
Yeah.
or I had one where we're like 50, 70, and
So
this year it's very little classes.
Yeah, they were saying that they saw a drop in about 31% in international enrollments.
Do you think it's because of the money?
I think it's because of the actions of certain governments that exist currently in Quebec that are not amenable to international students.
Yeah, that's right.
But, that's just me. I'm sure there are plenty of other factors at play, but
that for a year?
No,
One
for
semester.
just a semester.
Yeah.
Good.
Well, at least it's not going to be the rest of the winter.
Well, you'll see the end of it. The start of it.
The start of it. When it's pretty.
When they still enjoy it.
Yeah.
Speak for yourselves.
I don't know. After January, I'm just very
I'm
depressed.
curious to see the winter in the city, though.
It's
not fun.
slushy and cold.
That's what I'm expecting.
There are no way to walk. Like they if there's like huge snowstorms like last year, my pavement was just never done. Ever.
Awesome.
Yeah, awesome.
Like, for people that walk a lot, you were like in this of snow.
I'll have to figure my life out.
You might. I've seen some people. That depends if you have the room or the money for it. I've seen some people straight up just go around the city in skis.
Yeah.
I've seen that with my own eyes.
Yeah. My neighborhood.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's a thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
How to ride or work in winter?
Yeah, it's cool.
Okay.
It can be rough.
You're gonna be for the beginning of it, so there's not
Before it gets
Okay.
Yeah, it's not that bad for that. Mostly ice.
The winter semester is a bit more
intense.
In
Yeah.
C2, there's way less people around.
Oh yeah.
Oh
Good.
yeah. Like I see right now, there's like a bunch of people coming in the morning, and in winter there's like nobody.
No.
People tend to take much less classes in the winter, or a lot of teachers last year were doing online classes too because of the snowstorms. They were like, no, we're not going to make you come in for this.
Fair.
I mean, that's the advantage of online courses at the very least.
Yeah.
Like if you want to do it if you have a snowstorm or anything like that, that's what Zoom is for.
Yeah.
Thursday's classes, American Lit, that's online for this class.
For this class.
This week, yeah.
I took the very first one.
Yeah.
And I was back to Brazil there, and it was a 5-minute class.
Yeah.
Yes.
But like I said, this week is also an online class.
Awesome.
Oh, really?
At least
Okay.
you can enjoy a little downtime.
Yeah.
Settle in. Okay. So let's come back to the question that I asked. When Kurtz says the horror, what is he talking about?
Ladies first.
I'm sorry?
Ladies first.
Ladies first.
Exactly. It's like, who wants to go first?
Look, the reason why I'm asking is because I don't think there's one fixed answer, right? So I'm curious, like what your thoughts are on it. I have two that I favor, but I'm still curious, like what you would go for.
Honestly, to just say anything to start the ball rolling, I feel like that would help.
Yeah, absolutely.
I feel like it could just be what is being done
Yeah.
to Congo, like what they've been doing, what they're trying to do again, his actions. I feel like that could be a horror.
Yeah.
And
in the general
it
speaking.
was, let's just say, that classical sentence, what have I done?
Exactly.
Okay.
Like the horror.
Yeah.
Why did I do that? You know.
Because the man didn't want to be in the start. Maybe.
Yeah, it's like he failed himself.
Yeah.
Good. Well, I was just about to ask then. Yeah, I think that's a really good point, Ling.
I think firstly he's a super nice man. Maybe he don't want to do actions he did after, but yeah, he just he just become a man.
Yeah.
He don't want to be.
Yeah, I think that's really because that becomes ironic then, right? Because he's aware firmly in that reading of the horror as being aware of the horrors of colonialism in the most basic sense, right? The horrors that you see throughout, right? Marcio, you brought up the heads, but also the actual work that they ask the natives to do with the ivory and the whipping and so on and so forth, the racism, etc. But it becomes ironic because he then becomes the thing that he hates the most. Yeah, he becomes the leader of this kind of weird, violent cult that we don't quite know like the details of what exactly that entails. And I think that's maybe something, if we have time, we can unpack, like why Conrad would leave it somewhat open-ended, what that society or what that group actually does and why they're there. But yeah, it becomes extremely ironic.
Mm-hmm.
Good. What else could it be aside from what he's
It's
done?
also about the whole colonialism, the action of all the European, what he do to distract or
Good.
to how to say the words. The exploration in Africa. I think it's the whole blame for this action. Yeah, for all the European or
good.
Just, yes.
And I think that use of all Europeans is really valid here because Kurtz himself becomes a kind of stand-in throughout the story of different European nations. Yeah, and the only reason I say that is because Conrad makes a point of saying that he speaks multiple languages. Right, he's never had quite a fixed place. Right, he's British, I think, of birth, and German. Yeah, Kurt's German. So, but he works for a Belgian colony, right? There's kind of overlap there, and so he becomes then, by his very openness, linguistically and culturally speaking, a kind of stand-in for all Europeans in that sense, or Europeans with a capital E, which it already is, but you understand what I mean, right? So I think, yeah, very good. Yeah, there's still more. There's always more.
Yeah, but in this case, it's the word horror. It could be anything, like the sickness he's dying from, the fact that he's dying in Congo and not in Europe.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah, maybe he's so selfish.
Okay, wait.
Yeah, maybe he's like, why am I here?
Okay, wait, slow down. Okay, so we brought up, colonialism, of course.
His actions.
Yeah, his actions. Okay. Sickness. This is going to be really important when we come back to the tiger flu, obviously. For, title reasons. You can guess that one, but also thematically speaking.
The title.
Yeah. Why does the sickness matter here, right? His illness. This is really good. So obviously it's a personal horror for him, right? Because it brings him closer to death.
Oh, yeah.
So in that sense, it's rather horrifying. Why else would that represent a horror?
I believe sickness there is some kind of punishment for what he has done.
Yeah, like that.
Yes. Punishment. Punishment by what?
By being some head of colonialism or
nature?
something.
Oh, actually, I saw that in a book. Yeah, it's nature's way of fighting colonialism. All of the, COVID, for an example, is like the planet's way of fighting us by creating a new bacteria or anything that could kill us, because it's like it's created by the environment.
Mm-hmm.
Somehow sometimes it's living in some animals, some trees, and when we interact with them in a terrible way, it attacks us.
Some kind of vengeance. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's not an attack personally. It's more like you did something, I'm gonna react to it, but I'm not exactly trying to kill you, but
That's what ends up happening.
Yeah, we get killed by it.
Kind of like a defense mechanism.
Yeah, exactly.
Either a defense mechanism, or to bring it back to what Spivak was saying, right? Just to bring that full circle. That time flat circle thing. Just to come back to that, right? The planet as an agent in and of itself, it has its own mechanisms, right? That don't care necessarily about humans at all times, right? We gave the example last week of a volcano. Volcano doesn't erupt on the whims of humans, right? It just is, right? And it has its own agents. And to add on to your excellent points that you were just discussing, you can kind of think of a sickness as a similar way, right? As yet another agent that exists on this planet, right? That affects us sometimes, right? I heard this comparison, and I hope I'm not going to butcher it when I recount it. That I think really helped me understand this perspective of sickness as a kind of planetary force, so to speak, or element of the planet, I should say, not a planetary force. Think of a cold. Yeah, like just the common cold that we all have had, I'm sure. Did it evolve to transmit itself through humans, right? Or is it something that has its own kind of pathway that we just happen to be in the way of?
It's
right?
easy to be spread.
It's evolved to be spread, right? You can kind of think of it as its own agent in a sense, right? It's something that affects us.
As if the idea of it being spread through one human to the other is our interpretation of what is actually agency from nature.
Right. In a way, like you can think of it in that sense. And I'm not saying that you have to buy into this entirely, right? We're not biologists. None of us are biologists as far as I understand, right? But it is when we it's a kind of like interesting metaphor at the very least to think through this idea, right? And you've seen these kinds of interpretations throughout history. The most famous example being the plague, right? The Great Plague that hit Europe in the Middle Ages, right? Or even you hear this kind of rhetoric, to bring it back to colonial rhetoric, when Europeans arrive in North America, right? And that common cold that I just mentioned wipes out half of the native population here by its very existence, right? And so there's all kinds of ways that sickness becomes a kind of agent in and of itself, right? Spanish flu, yeah. Very much so. And this whole idea of militarizing the language that we use in relation to sickness is really interesting to think about, right? Because the Spanish flu emerged right around World War I, right? And you still see this like heavily militarized language when it comes to sickness, right? We have to fight this disease, right? It is a war on COVID, for example. You heard that a lot, right? During that whole pandemic. Right?
Just incidentally, how bad was COVID-19 down here?
It was pretty bad, but not as bad as in some parts of the world. Mostly because people broadly respected the measures. Broadly speaking, obviously there were some people who didn't, like anywhere else. And there were, like in the United States, some protests for people who were like anti-vaxxers type of things. So there was all kinds of stuff, but generally speaking, it was not as bad as it could have been.
Yeah, basically a lot of people took the vaccine too when
Yeah.
it came out.
Yeah. I think where a lot of people were critical is how, and again, you can agree or disagree with this perspective, but a lot of people were critical that we were sending out vaccines to a bunch of places in the world before having vaccinated our own population, right? And so that caused more social strife than actual like strife vis-a-vis the disease itself.
I don't think we like did not have enough here.
No, we had enough.
Yeah.
It's just people there was that whole element of like, well, we should make sure that our people are vaccinated first and then export it to places like India or whatever. Yeah. Anyway, broadly speaking, not as bad as it could have been. Yeah. Okay, good. So yeah, sickness. I really like this. Let's keep going. Right? There's still more. There's still more. I guess we talked about it earlier with what Yanni was bringing up about the eyes. What's one thing that we haven't mentioned so far? That can be rather horrifying.
The nature,
The projectile.
Yeah.
literally.
There's a reason why the book is called this way. Yeah. The literal heart of darkness, right?
Yeah.
What is it? Right? What is that heart? Right? Is it this untamed nature? Is it the sickness at the core of colonialism? Right? What is the darkness? We were talking about that earlier. It can be all kinds of things.
The mind. I mean, there's a huge paragraph at the beginning of the story. There's literally a paragraph that starts with mind.
Yes, there is.
Just begins to talk about it.
Where is that? Where is that section? I want to talk about it.
It's very at the beginning.
Yeah. I know exactly which one you're talking about, but it's fantastic. While I'm looking for it, what did you guys think of the prose here? That's usually what stops people
it's
from.
page 5, so I don't
Yeah, I see it. Yeah. Here we go.
Yeah, just mind.
Yeah.
It's thrown there.
It's just thrown in.
Mind.
Yeah. Mind, he began again, lifting one arm from the elbow, the palm of the hand outwards, so that with his legs folded before him, he had the pose of a Buddha preaching in European clothes and without a lotus flower. Mind, none of us would feel exactly like this. What saves us is efficiency, the devotion to efficiency. I really like this, but I guess I like it because it ties together, I think, these elements really, really well, right? Why is nature horrifying to the European colonizers, right, who are coming in?
It's their mindset of it.
Yeah. You're faced with your own consciousness. There is, in the European mind, right, and you see this in the passages that we quoted, there's nothing out there. Right, quote unquote nothing. Obviously, there's plenty, right? There's the nature, there's the animals, there's the locals, there's plenty. But the logic that they're going and that they're operating under is that it's a blank space that needs to be filled in, right? That's why they mentioned the map part. Yeah? And because in the European mindset, the colonial mindset, it's nothing, you're left with having to fill it in your own mind. And that is a rather terrifying prospect for some people, right? And I think you're absolutely right that for Kurtz, it is one that can break someone, break them internally. Yeah. I've been toying with this idea. I have no idea if it's actually something that has been done before. I have not looked into it at all. But I've been toying with this idea of planetary psychology. Right? And yeah, I'm glad that someone brought up the idea of mind here of I guess it kind of fits in with what we were talking about last week with Shelley,
Yeah.
Right? His mind cannot conceive of
Yeah, when
the grandness of Mont Blanc.
he moves to point, and he just kind of loses himself in it.
Yeah. Except for Shelley, it's great because that's the equivalent for him of just like zoning out and embracing the world around him, and he's happy doing that.
Yeah.
But it's unacceptable in the colonial frame, in the global frame.
Because everything needs to have a way of, not a way, but it's like everything has an objectification. Like there is something, that's how we can use it.
Yes.
It's not just there is something there. It's like, I see that. Now, what can I do about it?
Yeah, that's why they mention.
How can I use it?
Yeah, that's why they mention efficiency in that same paragraph. And it's interesting. You, Ling, brought up Rousseau last week. Yeah, that's the great insight that Rousseau brings to Western thought. Yeah, is that the mind is this thing that we can slowly understand. Right, and come to understand. He does it through introspection and kind of like ninja logics himself into believing in his own mind. But that's kind of his basic advancement of Western philosophy, is that this mind can be grasped at, right? And I think we all know now that that's kind of wrong in many ways, right? Like, yes, we can grasp at it, but the great advancement of psychoanalysis many, many centuries later is that it's much more complicated than that, right? And attempts at doing that in a rigid scientific manner can lead to insanity in many ways. And I think that's really good. I think that's as good a place as any to show you the clip that I wanted to show you, which gets at this heart of darkness. Who here knows Werner Herzog, the director?
I mean, maybe not by name.
Yeah. He's a very well-known German, actually, director, which is not intended for this as a relation. He's a very good German director. He's known for a lot of his documentaries, and he's rather esoteric in his kind of approach and mindset. And this would have been, I want to say, like 45 years ago. He made a film called Fitzcarraldo, which is based on real events, wherein a German man arrives in Peru and wants to build an opera house in the jungle, right?
Sure.
And in order to fund his opera house in the jungle, he tries to get into the rubber business, and it becomes this whole thing. Yeah. And there's a point in the movie where, I'm not going to explain like a 2.5 hour movie, but there's a point in the movie where he has to literally drag, or he decides to drag his boat, his steamboat, up a hill to get it to the other side of a mountain, into the other like tributary that's on the other side. I'm not going to explain why, because it's stupid and it doesn't matter. But the point is, he has to like actually go through it. And in the behind the scenes, Herzog decides to actually do that, right? Like, he hires local indigenous people to drag a boat up a hill and down a hill into the other side of the mountain so that it's visually accurate in the context of the movie.
Sure.
Because Werner Herzog is also kind of crazy as a filmmaker. And it gives incredible shots, right, to the movie, but also he could have easily done it with miniatures, right? The technology at the time was good enough that you didn't have to actually do it. But the reason why I'm talking about all this is because as a result of wanting to do this, they spend years in the jungle. And it kind of breaks Herzog as a person, right? Like, emotionally, it really breaks him, right? As a filmmaker, it really breaks him. And they actually made a documentary about the filming of this movie. And this clip that I'm going to show you is Herzog himself talking about a brief moment of his experience in making this movie and his experience in the jungle. And I think it really gets at what we're talking about with the horror part, especially those last two parts here. I think the volume will be loud enough, but if it isn't, I'll just improve it. It's a 4-minute clip. I'll play it in its entirety, and we'll move on from there.
Herzog is stranded in the jungle with a 300-ton steamship that won't move, and time is running out. He needs money to move the ship, but no one will invest unless the ship moves first. Behind his back, some of the actors are talking about getting out while getting his food. I need a film the cast who the Indians believe he was dreaming. Even Herzog is beginning to out.
Of course, we are challenging nature itself, and it is that's grandiose about it, to accept that it is much stronger than we are. His canvas says it's full of erotic elements. I don't see so much erotic as full of obscenity. It's just in nature there is only base. I don't see anything erotic. I don't see fornication and asphyxiation and choking and fighting for survival and ruin. Just dropping away. Of course, there's a lot of misery, but it is the same misery that is all around us.
He's so done.
But the outside misery,
Misery. With the like sounds of nature in the background.
That's really just
Yeah.
the breathing.
He continues for a sec after.
Hands with the children.
it's an unfinished country. It's been prehistorical. The only thing that is lacking is the dinosaurs. It's like a goose brain and whoever goes too deep into this has his share of that curse. So we are close to this object of it's a land that God, if he exists, has created an emblem. It's the only situation. Taking a close look at what's around us, there is some sort of enemy. It is the enemy of overwhelming and collective murder. Articulate violence, baseness, and obscenity
Oh my god.
of all this giant. In comparison to this enormous articulation, really only sound and look like barely pronounced and half-finished sentences out of a stupid suburban whatever cheap novel. And we have to become humble in front of this overwhelming misery, overwhelming fornication, overwhelming growth, and overwhelming lack of murder. Even the stars up here, the star cameras, there is no harmony in the universe. We have to get acquainted to the center of it. There is no real harmony as we have conceived it. But when I say this, I am full of admiration for the setting. It's not that I hate it, I love it. I love it very much. But I love it against my better judgment.
That's so interesting.
It's so.
You know, he
The
sounds
misery.
like
The
that
misery.
actor, Christopher Waltz.
Yes, Christoph
Sounds
Waltz.
like
Yeah.
pretty
Um,
much.
Yeah, I think he comes from the same country, so
That's
makes
so
sense.
funny.
But It's a really interesting clip. I saw so this is from the documentary about Fitzcarraldo called Burden of Dreams. And I think that title and this clip will live forever in my mind, right? Not only because it's insane at times, right? It's just awesome. Is like just the unruly, what did he say? The unruly like fornication of everything or whatever.
Yeah.
Just,
he was.
yeah, just
That's so funny.
And
Yeah.
then he's like, it's not that I love it. I'm like, are you sure?
It's not that I don't hate it. I love it.
but exactly.
Yeah. Against my
He's trying to
Better
convince
judgment.
himself. Or
Yeah.
Yes.
Trying to convince
he's
her.
a
He's trying to
trust.
convince himself, right?
Like,
Yes.
I'm supposed to love this, but then he's like, I hate it.
Devotion and
Oh yeah, he was messed up.
100 years after Heart of Darkness.
Oh yeah.
And it could have basically been written in Heart of Darkness, I
Mhm.
think. Right? Like those passages, especially towards the beginning where Marlowe is going through the river, you do get echoes of this, of exactly what Herzog is saying. Yeah?
Mhm.
It's so beautiful and horrifying, and oh my god, I
No.
need it with like this weird sexual passion, and yet I cannot help but want to control it, and I don't know how I feel about this. It's overwhelming and terrifying, and
Yeah, the vocabulary
The
he
horror.
uses a lot is like it's always like gloomy or like supernaturally silent and calm when it should be, and
Yeah.
It's like the way he speaks just kind of bumps to each other. It's like,
it's like very contradictory in itself.
oh yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I send this clip to
Stars
whoever.
over this.
Yeah.
Every time I have like new friends, I want to make sure that they're like actually like people I can get along with. I send them this clip. It's like, if they vibe with, no, I don't actually do that.
Would you mind uploading it?
Oh, yeah.
Sure, I want to show that
Sure.
to my phone.
I'll send it to Studium for
My
sure.
roommates are gonna have a blast.
Yeah. But it is a fascinating example of how this idea persists, right? And I guess it's closer to when Spivak would have been writing her text, right, and asking us to think about the planetary, rather than the global. Yeah. So you can see why she would have written
When was
the clip 82.
Okay.
Yeah, so 1982.
Yeah.
So almost exactly 100 years after this was published. And I think 10 years before Spivak writes this, something around those lines. 20 years. Okay, so almost around the same time. But because she mentions the demise of the Soviet Union, so it would be after 1991. So, but regardless, right, you see why this class and this concept of planetarity becomes relevant, right, outside of just Heart of Darkness and, beyond it. It's because people like Herzog and other artists are still reckoning with what's brought up, I guess, in Conrad, right, on a very fundamental level, right? And this is kind of why I'm bringing this up now, is that you can see the inklings of planetary thought emerging here, but not the ways there's no way to quite put it into words yet, or quite the way that you can put it into any kind of practice, right? Despite the criticism that Conrad is going for, it's kind of hard to escape the colonial world that he's also living in, right? That imposes these ideas onto it. So you see kind of a reaching for something different, right? And I think, just to come back to that excellent point that you brought up, Marcio, you see some inklings of planetary characters that have little elements here and there. You also see this in Herzog. But we just don't quite have the capacity to move past into it yet. Right? Before we come back to one final point, and then we'll stop for that day. Something else that this reminded me of, that this clip reminded me of, especially in its reference to the dinosaurs. Yeah, it's So obviously you can take it into like a really racist territory of like, oh, people living here and the whole nature is untouched, right? And still prehistoric, right? They're close to the Stone Age type of thing. I mentioned in week 1 that this book also made me think of another author called J.G. Ballard. I don't know, because it was just Alicia and Leonie who were there. I don't know if you remember that I mentioned him. He's a really interesting author, science fiction author, who wrote basically a trilogy of novels that reckons with Heart of Darkness from a more like scientific and up-to-date perspective, a science fiction up-to-date perspective, I should say. And one of them is called The Drowned World, which came out in 1966. 66, 65, whatever. Early 60s. And he wrote another one called The Crystal World, and I forget the third one. But there's a really interesting passage in Ballard's Drowned World that makes me think of all of these concepts, and that also brings us back to the concept of time that I was talking about at the beginning of class today, where Ballard writes, he was moving backwards through the emerging past. I'll say it again if people are writing it down. He was moving backwards through the emerging past. And I think that's a really good line, not just because of its like poetic prosody, right? That's kind of nice. But also because it really captures what we're talking about here. Right? This kind of intemporality that's seen in Heart of Darkness, but also this engagement with various points in time while moving forward in space. Right? That's very hard to get at in anything but literature, so to speak. Which is why, like, when we talk about planetarity, we talk about it often in literary terms, because it's often through literature that we can do that, yeah, and truly get at these concepts. Not all classes, by the way, are going to be like this philosophically dense, but I think it's good to lay some of these groundworks here. Yeah. He was moving backwards through the emerging past. So that, to fully bring this back to what we were talking about at the start of class, what this represents is not just what Heart of Darkness and Spivak are doing on a thematic level, right, with time and space. It also represents kind of what we're doing on a formalistic level in these texts. Right? Remember I said that Spivak does mirror Conrad in some ways, where form is concerned. And I started off the class by mentioning form, right? And that, or I started our discussion of Heart of Darkness with form, per se. Mm-hmm. And you do see this reflected in many ways in the way that the story is told, right? Conrad's story is told. He starts off in one moment, goes back in time, and yet going forward through time, both in the context of the story and in the present of the frame narrative. Yeah. So he's kind of circling back constantly onto himself in the literal structure of the narrative. So that when we talk about planetarity, and I think that's part of the genius of Spivak's text, is that she does that also, right? She circles back to points and kind of goes on tangents and returns and talks about different texts over and over again, and in a kind of circular, weird way. It's not just that characters and themes are planetary, it's that the way the story is told can be seen in that way as well, right? A global piece of literature, or a globalized piece of literature, is like the cheap airport novel that Werner Herzog brought up, right? It goes in a linear fashion that's clear-cut and makes sense. a form of planetary literature might be something that kind of breaks down those barriers, right? Through the narrative itself, we kind of reimagine what it means to engage with a narrative. Right? It's very postmodern in that sense, yeah, which is why Ballard is kind of finding new valence by planetary thinkers, right, who are coming back to him 60 years after some of his texts have been produced, is because he's kind of like a postmodernist avant la lettre type of thing. And so is Conrad in many ways. Right? People kind of signal this as the beginning of modernism. I would argue he's almost a postmodernist in that planetary sense, right? The time of the narrative itself kind of unravels and goes back and forth in ways that have us reconsider what it means to progress through a story. I got all that from a 4-minute clip. What did you get out of it? Is there anything anyone wants to add? We're kind of winding down today. I know it was like a big bomb that I just dropped in the middle of class here, and it's fine if you don't have anything you necessarily want to add to this, but I just thought it would be a kind of good way to wrap everything together. Yeah, please.
But I think it's not relevant.
There are so many things that are relevant.
The place where I lived back there in Brazil actually is full of macaws.
Yeah.
Macaws like that. And on the top of my house,
nice.
There's a birdhouse. And at the beginning of the day, I wake up with those macaws there, and they are extremely noisy. And at the end of the day, the same thing. And I felt like, this is home.
That's awesome.
Yeah, a couple of hours I was back there, and I seen this bird there, killed like that, and
that was pretty violent.
It was violent. Yeah. And I mean, the symbolism is obvious in what he's going for here, because he does see it as like an inherently violent place.
Yeah.
Even though that's not necessarily accurate, but we talked a lot here about obviously Africa, right? Because of the context of the story. Yeah. But I think it's interesting that you bring it up, Marcio, in relation to Brazil, right? Because, this is something, you can kind of, I was planning on maybe talking about it later in the semester, but we can kind of like foreground it here. You see a lot of similar narratives that use the Amazon instead, right? Instead of the Congo River. But you see similar narratives taking place, right? Of exploration into this thick, weird jungle. I say weird in the language of in the language of those stories, right? But I think it's so beautiful, right? That kind of messiness that exists and that Herzog, I think, accurately points to, right? Is it's so engaging in a heterodox way, I guess. So I do think it is relevant to the class that you bring this up, because even if it is not explicitly the same location as Heart of Darkness, you do see a lot of parallels to the way that people talk about the Amazon. And obviously explicitly in terms of like the extraction narratives and the extraction of the Amazon itself, right? What better example of globalization than the Amazon? Right? How much of it is gone now? The percentage? It's like a third of it has been removed.
Something like that.
Yeah. Growing.
I don't have
farms everywhere.
Yeah, farms like the ones that we saw in Louisiana.
Yeah, mining.
Like you would see in Africa, right? Or here. Yeah. So no, it's absolutely relevant. Very good. Anything else that we want to add to that?
To the clip or
anything?
Okay.
There's I kind of like got stuck a little bit on forming like the embedded narrative or like
good
narrative. And when came up with the idea of the mind, because I just highlighted some like excerpts. So I was like, here in my copy, it's page 36. So this must be after like 1/3 of the
Okay.
I don't have the divisions of the chapters.
Oh, okay. So what's the start of the paragraph?
Well, there's like, I beg your pardon, I forgot the heartache, which makes up the rest of the price. I don't know exactly what they're like talking about at that point, but it's just the little like break in the flow there, where like Marlowe, for a second, is been told, try to be civil. Marlowe ground a voice, and I knew there was at least one listener awake besides myself.
Oh,
and I found it interesting how he is telling this whole like story. It's kind of like a long story for just like if you're like talking with friends. He's like
on a boat.
He's like taken over the whole like conversation, and he is telling that story without really expecting for anyone to listen. So it's like, is it a way to like for him to look at this differently, or to have a different understanding of, I don't know, of the whole of it? I don't know. Every time the narrator, like, every time there was like a break in the narration, I was like, what is the effect of that? Like, why is it that right now, like, the others are like, or the exterior narration is like brought back to the center for a second?
Yeah. He does that sometimes, like, I'm telling times, things like that, where he's like, I'm telling something to someone.
My reading of it, personally, I don't know if anyone wanted to add on to that afterwards, but whenever I see these moments, to me, it's almost Marlowe who's getting lost in his own thoughts, right? When we're talking about mind, right? It's Marlowe kind of letting himself go in a kind of stream of consciousness type of way, which would be, of course, a staple of modernist literature. The famous example being people like Virginia Woolf or James Joyce, right? Those types of authors who would just kind of go off and write things as if they were just thinking of them on the spot. Yeah. And in a way, this kind of getting lost in his own mind parallels of course, the trajectory that he's describing in the story. Yeah. He's getting lost in the Congolese jungle and river and so on. And these interruptions kind of bring him back in an attempt to reimpose a kind of order, right? And I think this is crucial because I guess this is a question we should have asked at the start of class, but we're asking it now. I think this is a crucial detail because where are they actually situated when they're telling these stories? Like when Marlowe is telling the story in the quote-unquote present of the work, where are they?
Yeah, it's the Thames.
The Thames, yeah.
London River.
Yeah, they're in the heart of Imperial Britain.
That's where all of the boats passes. The huge cargo boats.
Yeah. They're in the heartland of the British Empire, right? London, right? That's where the Thames is. And it is the place that dictates these arbitrary divisions that we were talking about that are integral to globalization. And every time someone interrupts him, he goes from meandering in the river of his own mind, to use the terms from Shelley's poem last week, to the heart of perhaps a different kind of darkness. I don't know what else to say about that. Sometimes you just feel like you can like end on a mic drop type of thing. You can't force it, really. But yeah, I think you're absolutely correct, Leonie, in raising that aspect of the story. It's a really good one, and one that you can maybe think about in relation to next week's text, Split Tooth, which you have right here. Do you mind if I take your copy here for a sec? Did you manage to get it through Penguin? Did you manage to get it through Penguin?
No.
Okay.
I have a question about that.
Yeah, okay, cool. All right, so next week we're reading this book, okay? by Tanya Tagaq, who's incredible. And expect more clips next week for different reasons entirely. She's a throat singer, so I'm going to be bringing like clips in of her work. We're only spending 1 week on it, even though it is like a bit of a thicker book. If we decide that we want another week, we'll probably just like extend it to the week after. We'll kind of see. It was a bit of an arbitrary decision to spend 1 week on it. And also, like I mentioned, it does read surprisingly fast. Like we have one page here, and then it's split up by images, right? So it goes up pretty quickly, and even there are even some sectors. There are even some sections that are just poetry, right? So that goes by like pretty quickly. But the reason why I wanted to end on form is I think it does segue nicely into this, right? We explicitly read a colonial narrative here, right? Next week, we're reading a text by an Inuit author, right? Who also plays with the form and construction of what we would expect of a novel, right? And so as you read through this, try to think of like the differences, I guess, between the two of these, right? How in similar but also very distinct ways, they're each breaking down the expectations of narrative and what effect that has on the actual reading of the text and enjoyment of the story itself. Because it is a very dark story, by the way. Split Tooth, if you haven't started it, but very dark. It is rather hopeful at the end, I would say. It comes out as a hopeful narrative, but the impetus for the story is rather intense. But yeah, I think that's all I'll say about that for now. But I hope you do enjoy Split Tooth. I will also be rereading it this week. I've read it before, of course, otherwise I wouldn't have assigned it and just like attempted to hubristically teach something that I have never read before. But I have some colleagues that have tried to do that to great lack of success. To great failure, I should say.
I feel like it could have been interesting.
Yeah.
In a way.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Like you test the limits of your ability to bullshit your way out of like 3 hours.
I guess it would be easier if it was like a really short story.
Oh yeah. Yeah. If you
have the time to read it more than once.
Exactly. You can also easily bullshit your way into like poetry that you haven't read because you can read it on the spot. Yeah. I did read the poetry that we talked about last week, by the way. So, but yeah, just as a general rule, it is something that you can get away a little bit more easily than a novel. I don't know if you can call this a novel. I guess that's one of the questions that we'll talk about next week. What is this exactly, if not a novel? Okay. It's 11:23. I don't think I'm going to start like a whole new topic at this point. Thank you very much for a very interesting discussion, and I will see you all next week.